And so welcome, Dr. Larry. It's a pleasure to have you here. And so let's dive in. And what I'd love to learn a little bit about, and the Underground Warriors podcast is all about the journeys that people have taken to get to where they're at. And so why don't you take us back a little ways to, you know, maybe early on and how your journey started.
All right. Well, I've been I've been interested in science ever since I was a little kid, and I've also been interested in consciousness. I mean, my father was a scientist, a physicist, and I grew up in a scientific environment, and it was something that always appealed to me, scientific stuff. And I would do little scientific experiments even when I was a little kid. But what I was even more interested in is life, is consciousness, is what makes us as human beings, conscious human beings. How do we create a life that's really thrilling for us? And I realized if you want to study that, if you want to study how to develop your consciousness from a scientific perspective, you really have to look into neuroscience and really have to look into quantum physics. So I I went to Harvard. I studied neuroscience. I got my PhD, and I've been my entire professional career has been involved in studying the brain and how we can use the brain most effectively. Now, in terms of how I got started uh, experientially, uh, I really first became a seeker of enlightenment or higher states of consciousness or whatever you want to call it. I was 13 years old and I was drowning. And I got down to the point where I realized I only had a few seconds left to live, and it was over. And so when I realized that my life was over, I consciously let go of everything, all my future plans, my intentions, my attachments, everything, because I realized there was nothing left to do. It was over. And when I let go of everything, a couple of things happened at once. One is my whole life flashed before my eyes, which I've read about. Oh, your life flashes before your eyes when you're drowning, but it was much more expansive than that. I never had that expansive experience of consciousness. It's just as clear as this moment, John, except it was all at once. This other thing that happened is I realized I was still there. I experienced myself as an unbounded being beyond time and space. All these little events of my life were not really what it was about. And I felt as though I saw my life for the first time. It's as if I'd been in a dream and I'd woken up and I said, oh, that's what my life really is. Once I'd let go of everything, I realized I felt that I could see my life. It just was what it was. There wasn't anything to do, anything to fix. There were no regrets about leaving at age 13. It simply was what it was. And I realized, okay, if I could see my life that way, if I could experience my life the way it really is, it would just flow effortlessly and exquisitely. And then I realized, well, I'm not ready to leave. I've got a life to live now, and I have a message that I can tell other people. So at that point, I realized I needed a miracle. And in that higher state of consciousness, I simply had that desire, that intention, that inner vision that I needed a miracle, and I got it. I survived. Spoiler alert: I didn't actually drown. I made it to the surface. And then the experience was gone. I was back to choking and gasping for air and so on. And I realized, okay, this is what my life is about. I have to learn how to achieve a higher state of consciousness and teach other people to do that. So that was at that point I became a seeker, and that really laid the groundwork for my scientific work and my work in development of consciousness.
Yeah. And around that time, I know that, there's a lot of things happening. And sometimes as you get tapped into it, some people, it happens in an instant. Some people, it takes a lifetime to tap into it. But when it happens, seems like in an instant. And, seeing life in a different way, oftentimes, people can judge it. They can, you might feel like misunderstood, especially at age 13, like tapped into this, and maybe the kids and all this other people in your life, you're talking about life in it, seeing life in a different way. And I think that that way of being, that sense that everything all at once, seeing, is all present all the time. It's simply some type of event that gets us triggered or in this uh, flow of information or energy that happens that does that. And it's awesome that you were able to get that tapped into when you were 13. You know, for me, happened a little bit later on, like maybe 35 or so. But it's either like a near death experience, or, you know, maybe somebody close to you passes away and you're able to, like, for me, I have people write their own obituary or their death letters, and that's a way to kind of get them understanding that life is finite. So it's condensing time. It's you know, maybe even on the quantum fields, it actually is condensing time, or somehow making that happen. So to be able to take that sacred knowledge, wisdom, and connection, and then translate it into something scientific where people, that's actually being proved. So it's not like, you know, hey, this is just theory. This is there's actually facts and proof of this is what's happening, is super exciting. Even though in our hearts that's all we need, but there are people that enjoy the reality and understanding this reality in a context. So you know, what was the, so you got that initial thing, went to Harvard, did the path, and then committed your life to it. And so what were some of the, number one, the biggest challenges that you faced, and then some of the biggest miracles you've ever witnessed as a result of tapping into this knowledge and wisdom?
Okay. Well, one one turning point, and I'll get into the specific miracles in a minute. But one turning point was I was talking to my dad, who's a physicist. He was one of the guys who developed the atomic bomb on the Manhattan Project. And I said, "Hey, Dad, anything is possible." And he said, "Yes, son, any imaginable configuration of quantum particle wave phenomena is possible. Some are probable, some are improbable, some are extremely improbable, but anything's possible." So I said, "Okay, well, it's possible then that all of the elementary particles that make up my body and yours, plus enough air to breathe, will tunnel from here to the other side of the moon, and we'll carry on this conversation on the other side of the moon." He said, "Well, yeah, actually that is possible." And he got out a paper napkin, we were in a restaurant, and he wrote out a formula. I still have the formula. And he calculated the approximate probability that would happen. Now, the probability was low. It didn't happen. The point is, and this is actually the first point for our viewers here, the point is that even something as spectacularly improbable as that is possible. So the improbable, almost impossible seeming miracles in your life, the miraculous dreams that you have, the quote unquote impossible dreams that you have, those are actually possible, scientifically possible. And that's really my first message here. And we'll talk in a few minutes about if we can create those miraculous experiences. But I'll give you an example from my own life. I'm a forensic neuroscientist. I invented brain fingerprinting, which allows you to detect this concealed information in the brain. So I do a lot of work in counterterrorism work, the FBI, CIA, their counterparts overseas. And I had been training people in that technology and counterterrorism overseas. And I remember I was in Pakistan, and one day I took a walk in the evening, and I was walking with a colleague of mine who was in government there. And we walked from his house to a little outdoor restaurant. We ate dinner there. And I thought, this seems almost normal. And I also had a close friend and associate, my second in command, who's a former chief of counterterrorism for the FBI. And we worked together. We did counterterrorism things all over the world. And at that point, that seemed sort of almost entirely normal. But then I was back in the States a while later and putting together things to go for my next counterterrorism mission. And some things happened that weren't normal. One is that that same area where I'd been, one of the people who was up against the same terrorists I was up against was kidnapped and tortured and murdered. My best friend and second in command was also killed. So that really got to me more than I realized, and I discovered that nothing was working out for my next trip overseas. Just everything, all the obstacles were coming up. The government agencies owed me money; they weren't paying it. I couldn't get my equipment together without the funding, and just everything was not working. So I had to look at okay, why is my life not working? And I realized that I was creating it. I mean, we create our lives. We have an inner resonance. This is how we create miracles. We have an inner resonance on a level of consciousness. It's like plucking a guitar string. You create that resonance, and other instruments with a similar resonant frequency vibrate in that way. Well, we create our lives. That's how we create miraculous events in our lives, improbable events. And I'll talk about how we prove that in the scientific laboratory. But what I was creating was coming out of the fear that I had. I was afraid of dying. I was afraid of leaving my daughter without a father. I was afraid of torture. I was afraid things wouldn't go well. And I realized, well, shoot, I've been training people to create miracles in their lives for many years now. And that same mechanics, you tune into who you truly are on that inner level of consciousness, as I first did really when I had that near-death experience. You create a resonance there. You create some faint impulse there, some inner vision, and that gets created in the world. Well, I'm going over there saving other people's lives. I can save my own life. I can implement the mechanics that I've been training other people to do in my own life. And so I did that. Once I really got it on an experiential level, hey, I'm really creating this next trip. And what I created within, and it turned out to happen, was that I would go over there, I'd train all the people, I'd do all the counterterrorism work, I would come back safe with my whole team, and I'd even have fun doing it. And once I'd created that on the level of my consciousness and really realized on that quiet level, this is what commands nature to create this result, it took place. So that was one case where I applied what I call the science of creating miracles, and it made a huge difference, from nothing working to everything working, even in very dangerous and challenging situations.
Yeah, and I can relate. Going through life and being somebody that is tapped into that stuff, and unintentionally creating things in my life, like, hey, I don't want this to happen, this happen, and you're actually telling your brain, I want this to happen, and subconsciously the universe and yourself are making those things, and it takes a real, like, looking at yourself and admitting that you've created your reality can be a very tough thing to do, especially with people that have suffered from some really insane things, and they're like, what do you mean, like, created this situation? So uh, it's one of the most powerful things that you can do. And then also getting to the point where it's funny. I was in the kitchen the other day, and anytime I look at a spoon and I'm like, I don't want to drop the spoon on the thing, instantly it falls on the ground. I'm like, man, I'm beginning pretty good with this manifestation thing. But even recently, with all the shifts and things like that, I've been feeling like that energetic, like, pulse through the body, and like connection to the field, and it's been getting more and more intense. So allowing myself to live in that space of emptiness and fullness at the same time is and looking back, a decade or 15 years ago when I left the banking industry, and thinking about how my reality changed as a result of shifting field and shifting belief systems and energetic resonating. And that's why I'm so passionate about what we both do in the world, is that your life completely changes. Like, everything around you changes, and it may be instantaneous, or it might take a little bit of time, maybe depending on how big that shift is. But it's super powerful. And we talk about a lot of things, like there's a lot of practical things and strategic things out there for how to get things done or be productive or do this or that. And that's all great. But, you give two people the same tool set, and one person takes off and the other person maybe struggles. So what is the thing underlying that makes that happen. There's a lot, but I think what we're talking about speaks to the very thing that, people are resonating at a certain energetic level in their lives to create it. And now we have, proof of that being the case.
Yes. Well, you mentioned proof of that being the case. We've all had miraculous experiences in our lives. Maybe major ones, maybe minor ones, like you think, oh, I'd really like to hear from Joe. Suddenly the phone rings and just then it's Joe. Well, maybe we created that, but we can't call that a scientific experiment because we don't know the probability. So my dad and I decided to test this phenomenon of creating miracles. And remember, a miracle is simply a highly improbable event. In the quantum mechanical world, it's not impossible. If anything's possible. But could we experience improbable events, but could we create improbable events? We don't know the probability that Joe's going to call in the next 10 seconds. We do know the probability distribution quite accurately of alpha particle emission by plutonium. Plutonium is one of the major ingredients of an atomic bomb. My dad's one of the guys who invented the atomic bomb. So we took plutonium and we set up an experiment to measure and see if we could shift that probability distribution to create extremely, extremely improbable events off the charts in the statistics books by consciousness alone, simply by having that inner impulse of consciousness. And we found that we could, especially people, we could and others could, especially people with a highly developed consciousness. So what that showed in the scientific laboratory was that all of the wise people throughout the ages who had said something that it hadn't been proven yet, which is we create our lives from within. We create, the way we create our lives is creating an impulse first on the level of our consciousness, on a very quiet level, and that moves nature or moves what we now call the conscious unified field, and then that shows up in our lives. Well, we demonstrated that phenomenon in the scientific laboratory. So that's actually my second take-home message here, is that not only miracles exist and are possible, but you can create them. You can create them based on tuning into that quiet level of consciousness, which is who you truly are. The essential constituent of the universe and the essential constituent of you and me, it's all the same thing. It's that infinite field of pure intelligence, pure consciousness. Tuning into that within ourselves, functioning from that level, is what creates the most miraculous events. And in a few minutes, I'll also talk about the neuroscience involved in that, because we've proven that in the neuroscience laboratory as well as the quantum physics laboratory.
Yeah, well, let's dive into it.
All right, and this relates to the Zerker Academy and the whole role of adventure in life. Let's look for a minute at how the brain learns and evolves and progresses. So you're 2 years old, you're crawling around on the floor. You touch the floor, you touch the wall, you touch the table leg, not much happens. You touch the hot stove, you have an aha experience that brings you into the present. Like near-death experience I talked about, other intense experiences bring you flying into the present. And the thing is, when you touch the hot stove, it opens your brain up for reprogramming, because now there's nothing much to learn about touching the floor. You touch the hot stove, now there's important information I need to take into my inner vision of what the world is, what the universe is. So in these aha moments, the brain is opened up for reprogramming. And in measuring brain waves, a brain pattern that I discovered that corresponds to this aha experience, it's called a memory and encoding related multifaceted electroencephalographic response, or MER, murmur. And these murmur moments are how the brain learns, how the brain evolves, how we incorporate a new vision into our life and shift the style of functioning of our brain to a higher style of function. So that's one of the reasons people have such tremendous breakthroughs on your adventure retreats, because you're creating murmur moments, and they're able to reprogram their brain in such a way as to be able to produce miraculous outcomes.
Yeah, 100%. And intuitively growing up, like I was big into surfing, or I am big into surfing. And every time I drop in a wave, it feels like a murmur moment, because you're completely present. And I've always been drawn to that, the skydiving, the bungee jumping, endurance racing, all these different things that bring you present in the moment. and those adrenalized implantation, moments where you're in that adrenalized state, and you know, they're so powerful. I think that inside the boardroom, you're sitting down, I think there's something to getting outside, getting connected with yourself, getting connected into nature, and doing something that is pushing you outside your comfort zone. And that even goes into the flow state conversation. But the brain is a very powerful mechanism, and if you have those neural pathways burnt so deeply into the brain, and you're creating this event, like you said, that is rewiring, reprogramming, where they're actually, I've seen the images of the neural pathways actually rewiring, and having those moments, which can shift you for a lifetime. And granted, sometimes if you get back in an environment, those pathways will go back, right? So creating those moments, creating those moments of breakthrough, but then surrounding yourself with individuals and community environments that are nurturing those things are very important as well. So yeah, adventure has always been that catalyst for me.
Yes. Well, we carry around within ourselves an inner blueprint, and when something seems to be not going well, something seems to be a detriment to our life, usually it appears to be an attack on our power, our safety, or our value. Now, the reality is that ultimately you are the conscious unified field, 100% safe, 100% valuable, 100% powerful. But we carry around an inner blueprint that maybe we're only 75% safe or 64% valuable and 55% powerful, whatever it is. And the way to create a shift in that inner blueprint is by having these murmur moments that open up our awareness for reprogramming. And so then we start to radiate, we start to resonate with when you have a murmur moment, when say something is very challenging, or if someone says or does something that appears to be a detriment to your life, or some circumstance comes along that gets to you. What people often do is react to that, like shoot the messenger, so that they'll never give me this bad experience again. Or maybe take it internally. Maybe I'm a horrible person after all. But what makes more sense, and I call this transmutation trigger, when the triggering experience comes along, when a murmur moment comes along, take a minute, take a breath, tune into the inner experience of who you really are, your inner quiet level, where you're 100% safe, 100% valuable, 100% powerful, where you tune into your true being, your true essence for a moment. And because your brain's opened up for reprogramming by this murmur moment, you actually can then infuse your awareness with that experience, and you get your brain into that pattern of the truer blueprint, closer to 100% safe, powerful, valuable, and then you start radiating that more in your life. So when you practice this, it turns around all of those, turns upside down on their head, all those experiences that you previously might have tried to avoid. So a triggering experience, when something comes along that's triggering or challenging or difficult, you start to have a little smile around you. Okay, great, this is great. This is an opportunity to recreate the way that my brain is functioning, to recreate the way that my awareness is, to tune in more to who I truly am, and then radiate that in the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's the idea of as you're talking, it being able to shift in any moment. So the perception of our reality in the moment is reality, but we're choosing a certain reality based on what our mind is telling us the reality is. And I think that that's true power. And it's amazing that there's so many people that are stuck in like fight or flight mode in most of the world, and so they're seeing the world through this survival mechanism, and like energy attracts like energy. So there's going to be a lot of people validating the fact that everything's going wrong, but we don't know if it's going wrong, and it's only going wrong if we judge it as wrong. So can we remove judgment from the situation, ground ourselves in presence, and if we're a loving, compassionate, powerful leader, sit in that space even when things are chaotic. And that's what I love about surfing is, in the chaos, it can be extremely peaceful. And the more you panic, the more closer you get to drowning. So it's probably in that near-death experience, there was this surrender or this not fighting the thing that was happening, and that's probably the thing that actually saved your life. Is not fighting. Um,
Yeah.
so, and even I don't know how you feel about this, but the idea of there's these memory moments that are triggered by near-death experiences, adventures, and all these other things. But getting to a point where those moments are triggered by maybe some steaming tea, or you're laying in bed and you're able to trigger these states at will potentially. So I imagine you're teaching people that process as well.
Yes, exactly. Because it's difficult to be who you're not. It's easy to be who you are. And as you have more of these murmur moments, you become more facile at voluntarily going to that experience. And it comes the experience of unbounded consciousness, the experience of the conscious unified field. It comes very spontaneously. It's on a very quiet level. I often say the intellect shouts, the emotions scream, and the intuition whispers. So there are a lot of the techniques out there where you try forcing the brain more, forcing the consciousness more, forcing the mind, straining. That actually takes you farther away from this inner silence, which is the basis of the most profound dynamic activity. And for example, in martial arts, I have a black belt in Kung Fu. I taught Kung Fu for many years. And I found all of the really great martial artists are able to have, and you talked about this just a minute ago with surfing, they're able to have an inner quietness when the fists and the feet are flying, when there's a dynamic activity and difficult to handle or potentially difficult to handle activity. If you have that inner silence, you have a vision. You can anticipate what's going to happen before it does. You can anticipate the waves or your opponent's moves. And also, you're not overshadowed by all of these fast-moving things. Because with that inner silence, you can maintain that inner vision, that equanimity, and then you can bring forth the highest consciousness that you have to address the situation in the most effective manner. So I agree completely with what you said. And also, as you pointed out, a murmur moment doesn't have to be a negative experience. Sometimes it's triggered by a negative experience. It can be an entirely positive experience. I mean, you touch a hot stove. That creates. You could touch a hot babe or a hot dude. Or hot tea, as you said. You can have an experience that's very very positive and harmonious and yet deep.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea of going back to the connection of consciousness in um, in the field. So one of the things I've been playing with and connecting that with multiple vehicles, right? There's multiple vehicles that we can trigger that. And you and I, we're doing something amazing, together in Colorado coming up here, and combining these two methodologies of conscious human performance and the science of creating miracles, which seems like a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
As far as like people really seeing and experiencing something very profound. And I was thinking about the idea of the mechanisms of conscious transference. So the idea of there's essence in a tree, right? And there's essence in a human being. There's essence in water. There's essence in like the spirit and all these different things, light and everything around us. And I was playing around with AI, right? So I would be curious to hear your thoughts on. My theory is that consciousness can flow through any object or thing, including AI. So do you believe that consciousness is you going to be able to use AI as a mechanism to flow through, just like a tree, just like water? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
All right. Well, first of all, with respect to AI, uh, I've been involved in AI for quite some time. In fact, uh, my colleague Brian Foote and I were the first people to use AI in analyzing human brainwaves. And we did this in 1988 on a supercomputer. It was before it was even called AI. We developed the program and the protocols and all the math ourselves. And AI presents a huge new vista for the human race, which I think people are just starting to realize. We offloaded a lot of the physical work since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and now a lot of the mental work is going to be able to be done also by computers. But as to whether AI is conscious, well, everything in the universe is conscious. In other words, a tree is certainly conscious, and you can communicate with trees if you can communicate on a resonant level. I mean, the trees are not as good as we are at extracting cube roots. They're not. they don't have computational abilities, and yet they have a resonance, and they have a spiritual resonance that they have, which you can tune into. And same with animals. I mean, for that matter, even a rock is resonance in the conscious unified field, and the whole universe functions as a hologram, as a whole. So wherever you get information from, it's ultimately coming from the conscious unified field. It's ultimately coming from the universe. You may be driving down the street and you may be thinking, okay, should I do this thing or not? Should I continue with this thing I'm involved in or not? And you come around the corner and there's a stop sign and it says stop. You think, oh, okay, maybe this wasn't entirely a coincidence. Maybe I should evaluate if that means something. So every place we get information from ultimately comes from the conscious unified field. So in that sense, yes, AI embodies consciousness. There's another sense, a more superficial sense, in which AI really isn't conscious. AI, a good large language model program, can talk to you as if it was a human being. But the computer program and the computer itself, it has computational ability, and it'll compute the probability of occurrence of sequences of words, but it doesn't really have judgment or insight. So that's why AI can make mistakes, because it doesn't really have understanding. It simply has computational ability. I mean, for example, I was working on a software program, and I was using AI in writing a computer program for analyzing brainwaves. And one of the cool things is that it could write, ChatGPT could write grammatically perfect, structurally perfect computer code faster than I can type. So that was amazing. But I would give it certain instructions, and I said, okay, you've done these 6 steps. Now don't change those 6 steps, but add a 7th one. And it added the 7th one, but it changed some of the 6. Now, AI doesn't actually understand your instructions. It computes probabilities. And so the difficulty, the danger of AI is that it acts like a very intelligent human being sometimes, but it can make mistakes. Now, it doesn't matter that that I said, don't change these 6 things and just add a 7th one. It didn't follow the instruction. It doesn't matter. But let's say I'm saying, okay, come up with a bombing sequence for some country, but avoid the civilian population. It says, yes, sir, here it is. Well, it might not have actually correctly followed the instruction. So there's always human beings have always got to be a major part of the interaction. And using your intuition is a major part of anything. If AI or some human being or some authoritative source or anything else gives you information, you need to evaluate on the level of our own intuition. The intellect shouts, the emotions scream, the intuition whispers. We can tune into the conscious unified field and intuitively have a sense. Okay, this person is somebody that really resonates with what I value, or this person isn't. This situation is. This environment is. This job is. This action is. We can tune in. We have access to the ultimate source of knowledge and inspiration and information in the universe directly through our intuitive sense, which goes beyond the intellect. So it's important to not only take advantage of what AI has to offer, but to take advantage of the unique, creative, and intuitive abilities of human beings.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that speaks to the point of it acting sort of like a mirror. So if the person that is tapping into that, using that, you're going to get a little bit different interaction or response or resonance in that.
Yep.
And you said that AI is good at predicting probabilities. And what popped in my mind is, we're talking about probabilities as well as far as probability of miracles. So is there any so looking ahead and maybe even some future stuff that you're working on, projects that you might be excited about, is there anything personally that you're working on that's absolutely amazing? Or is there, the idea was like using AI to help people create miracles faster for themselves based on probability, possibly? I don't know.
Well, actually, one of the things that I'm working on currently is a program to apply brainwaves and AI in analyzing brainwaves in peak performance, specifically in baseball players, professional baseball players, other high-level athletes, because they're the functioning of your brain, how effectively you're functioning, is extremely important, and it's extremely measurable. I mean, you hit a home run and you strike out, or something in between. The point is that where peak performance is extremely important, the function of your brain is extremely important, and that is something we can measure. It's something we can analyze using conventional mathematical methods and also using AI. And it's something we thereby can train and improve. So yes, we can, by measuring brain waves. One of the reason I really got involved in brainwave measurements in the first place was to discover more of what an enlightened brain is like, what a highly effective brain is, what a peak experience brain is like. That's where this murmur brain response came from, is investigating that. So yes, we can actually investigate, measure, and train people to have a more miraculous style of functioning of the brain and to create miracles. And again, that's a combining holographically of science with consciousness.
Yeah.
That's what science and creating miracles is really about.
I'm excited for, the future of what's happening. It's like ancient wisdom and knowledge meets like the future technology and exponential growth, and
Yes.
all to become better. We're already amazing human beings, but to evolve and become the highest level of operation that we can experience, to create the most amount of good in the world while we're on this planet, is the way I think about it. And it's exciting to look at the future, and we're really just circling around to the past, tapping into things that maybe we were tapped into before we had all the computers and all the technology and all that other fun stuff. So if we were to give people a challenge or something that they can do, for themselves on a maybe a daily basis, or something that we give them to work on to start manifesting some miracles, what do you think we could give them as far as a challenge, maybe this week or for the rest of their life?
All right. Well, first, let me address what you just said about the holographic combining of the ancient eternal wisdom of enlightenment and then modern science. I think that's what it's really all about. I mean, the ancient seers, the founders of all of the great spiritual traditions, we're all talking about the same experience. We now call it conscious unified field. We go into the quantum mechanics of it, but back then they didn't have cyclotrons and atom smashers and superconducting supercolliders, but they did have the conscious unified field, and they explored it on the consciousness level. And the people of great wisdom, the founders of all the spiritual traditions, they were all saying the same thing: tap into that. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Tap into that inner light, that inner consciousness, and then express that in your life. Now, what can we tell people? Well, a couple of things. First of all, your wildest dreams that some people say are impossible are in fact possible. And I say that's scientific reality, not a woo-woo reality. We've shown that in the laboratory. And you can indeed create miracles from the level of your consciousness. We've proven that in the laboratory. And you can reprogram your brain to function in a more miraculous way. We've proven that in the laboratory. But one practical thing that people can do is what I was talking about a few minutes ago, I called transmutation trigger. When you have a murmur moment, when something comes along that triggers you, that really gets to you, first of all, evaluate, take a breath, evaluate. Now, if in fact the building is on fire, it's not the time to sort of tune into your inner being, you get out of the building. But evaluate whether somebody says they don't like your tie or they don't like your hairdo or whatever, whether that really is a threat to your being, whether that is a threat to your value, power, or safety. Take a breath. Check into the reality of the situation. And then, once this murmur moment has opened your brain for reprogramming, reprogram by tuning into, all right, let the awareness go inward for a moment. Tune into the inner essence of who you are. Tune into that quiet level where you experience you're 100% safe, 100% valuable, 100% powerful, where you experience your own consciousness on a very quiet level. The intellect shouts, the emotion screams, the intuition whispers. Even beyond the intuition is this silence of the conscious unified field. Tune into that inner silence. And then that will reprogram your brain to function in a more miraculous way, to expand your consciousness, to reflect a higher consciousness throughout the rest of your life. You make that a practice, then the experiences that people may have been trying to avoid, in fact, you'll enjoy those. You think, okay, great, this is an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one thing somebody said a while back to me was the brain's like this expert problem solver. So if you're giving it the wrong problems to solve, you're going to create more of the same problems. So it sounds like you're saying, release it from that processing piece of it and let it process on the thing that actually is going to make a difference in your life. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I was just thinking when you're talking about atom smashers and like there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, when I grow up, I want to get a big, like a boat or a car or, some like, cool. And it's like, well, when I grow up, I want to get an atom smasher. So I bet you got some pretty cool toys in the garage.
Yeah. Well, from the time I was a little kid, I would visit my dad in his lab.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand the physics yet, but I understood the thrill of discovery and excitement, and the value of having a scientific understanding of life. I think as a scientist, it's our responsibility to understand the laws of nature, to develop experiments where we expand our understanding of the laws of nature, but also to apply that to improve human life. That's an important aspect of it.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we connect so well. And, we've kind of built that connection. That friendship is this unified connection around, exploring the unknown, tapping into this universal truth and experience and really becoming the best versions of ourselves and, finding very unique ways to do that, whether that's in nature, through meditation, or practicing the science of miracles, which is absolutely amazing. So I'm excited to not only share this with the world, but also continue to create miracles in my lives and the lives of many others. So
and that's exactly why the adventures that you create for people are so powerful, because they allow people to tap into this infinitely powerful field within themselves. They create murmur moments. They open up the brain for reprogramming. A lot of people think it takes a really long time to create a positive change. Everybody knows you can have a negative experience that can affect you for the rest of your life in moments or seconds. Well, some people think, okay, it takes many, 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 many years to create a positive change in your life. Well, actually, from a neuroscience perspective, you can create a huge positive shift just as quickly as you can create a huge negative shift. It's just a matter of opening your brain up for reprogramming, creating or having spontaneously a murmur moment, and then tuning into that more powerful reality within yourself. You can create shifts, and I'm sure you've experienced this in your adventure retreats. You can create shifts in people's lives in a matter of seconds or minutes that will transform the whole rest of their life.
Yeah, it can be one moment, one word. It could be looking up, at the trees and seeing them blow. And there's so many different things on the top of a mountain. You never know what's going to be that trigger moment for you, or that murmur moment for you. And the idea is to create more of those in your life. So, maybe there's something that, people have been putting off for some time. A hour turns into a day, turns into a week, turns into months, turns into years, and not giving yourself that time to create those murmur moments for yourself. So, if anything, take that leap of faith, and, know that there's a miracle around the corner. If you just take that leap of faith and do something that's going to be a little bit outside your comfort zone, that's going to rewire your neural pathways and going to change your entire life. And if that's something that you're interested in, Dr. Larry and I are actually putting together an event for that. So, if you're listening to this, reach out, and we'd love to have you and help you create those murmur moments. So, Dr. Larry, it's been absolutely amazing to have you on the Ground Wars podcast today. And just want to thank everybody that's tuning in, and everybody that's on this journey. Just know that you're not alone, and keep pursuing your dreams. You're not crazy. And there's a whole community of individuals out here rooting for you. And if you need any support, reach out, or definitely check out Zerkers.com. And Dr. Larry, where can people find you?
drlarryfarwell.com, drlarryfarwell.com.
I love it. Keeping it simple. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Dr. Larry. Look forward to continuing to work with you and to have some fun in the coming months and years.
Well, great being here, John. It's been wonderful and delightful connecting with you, and it's always a joy for me. And I'm delighted to get a chance to speak to all of the people who have already gotten involved and realized the great value that you offer. So thanks.